I think most of us, we like to think of ourselves as pretty rational people.
Right. In control.
Exactly. You're making thoughtful choices, weighing the evidence, using your own free will. At least um, that's the story we tell ourselves, isn't it?
It is. And that story, that perception of ourselves as being perfectly rational, well, that might just be the biggest bias of all.
That's it. So what if I told you that deep down, your brain is constantly using this whole set of hardwired shortcuts, thinking errors, fallacies, biases that are shaping pretty much every decision you make,
And you're almost never aware it's happening.
right? From something tiny to, the most important choices of your life.
These are the, let's call them the fast subconscious narrators of our lives. And they're always running. Deciding who to trust in a meeting, how you feel about a political candidate, even which checkout line to get in at the store. They save us time, for sure, but they definitely cost us accuracy.
So our mission today, here on the Deep Dive, is really focused on just one thing: awareness.
Yeah.
We're not trying to, fix your brain. You
Okay.
can't.
No, you can't.
But our goal is to help you become one of the few people who can actually notice these mental traps as they're happening. We're starting a deep dive into 10 of the most powerful mind traps, biases, and fallacies out there.
And this is so essential because these aren't bugs in the system. They're features. They are your brain's very old, very evolved attempt to conserve cognitive energy.
It's just easier.
It's so much easier. Thinking slowly, deliberately, what the psychologist Daniel Kahneman calls System 2 thinking is just, it's exhausting. It's mentally expensive.
And that's the key. This whole deep dive is heavily inspired by the work of Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman, especially the framework he laid out in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow. The sheer power of these unconscious influences it's really humbling when you see it quantified.
Oh, it completely changes how you see human decision-making and, frankly, how you judge yourself and others. We're going to explore how the mind will, choose internal peace over objective truth, how totally arbitrary numbers can manipulate even seasoned professionals.
And how our own memory is actively filtering reality just to maintain what we already believe.
Exactly.
So in the end, awareness really is the only tool we have. We can't turn these biases off. We can't delete them like a file. The only power we have is in recognizing the situations where they're most likely to pop up and influence our thinking.
And that awareness, that's the first step. It's the most critical step to becoming a more thoughtful, more rational thinker.
So where should we start?
Let's start with a really foundational one. It's about the incredible lengths our brains will go to just to avoid confronting an uncomfortable truth.
Okay, so our first mental trap is cognitive dissonance. This is a mechanism our brain uses to get what you just called internal peace. And the classic way to explain this is through one of Aesop's fables, the story of the sour grapes.
It's the perfect parable for this. So you have a fox, he's very motivated, and he spotted this beautiful bunch of grapes hanging high up on a vine.
And he really wants them. He tries to jump and get them, right? He tries once, he fails. He tries again.
Yeah.
The fable says he tries 3 times, and he can't reach them.
Now, right at that moment, the fox is experiencing this huge psychological conflict. This is what the social psychologist Leon Festinger first called cognitive dissonance back in the 50s.
And the conflict is simple, right? It's, I am a clever, skilled fox who wants those grapes.
I've just failed 3 times to get those grapes.
And holding those 2 conflicting ideas in your head at the same time, it creates this intense mental stress. It's painful.
It really is. And the brain wants relief from that pain immediately, so it steps in to resolve the conflict. And Festinger's work showed we have about 3 ways to do this.
Okay, so the first one, you could change your behavior, but that's impossible here, right? The grapes are still out of reach.
Right. Second, you could just admit the painful truth. I'm not a good enough jumper, or those grapes are just too high for me. But that damages the ego, the self-image.
So there's a third option.
The third option, the one the fox took. You just reinterpret the whole situation after the fact. You add a new belief that erases the conflict.
He just turns his nose up and says,
You know what? I don't even want those grapes. They're probably sour anyway.
and boom, the stress is gone. And that's where the phrase sour grapes comes from. Instead of admitting he failed, he just made up a new story that fit the outcome.
And we see this everywhere in the real world. Think about getting rejected for a job you really, really wanted.
Oh, yeah.
The conflict is, I'm competent and I deserve that job, versus they chose someone else over me.
And to avoid that pain, that feeling of maybe the other person was just better, your brain kicks right in. You start telling yourself, you know what, that company is a mess anyway. The manager seemed like a jerk. I dodged a bullet.
You rationalize the outcome to protect your ego, People do it all the time. They tell themselves they didn't really want what they couldn't get. But it's not just about failure. It also happens when our own values are in conflict. Well, say you grow up believing that, all rich people are greedy or evil, but at the same time, you desperately want to be financially successful.
Ah, okay, so you have this massive internal conflict. You want something that you also judge as being bad.
Exactly. And that internal psychological warfare, it can create huge amounts of stress, anxiety, even depression if those beliefs are central to who you are. You have to make a choice. Either give up on the goal of getting rich or change your beliefs about rich people.
Which is why that Rolf Dobelli quote you mentioned is so perfect.
Yep.
He says, you can play the clever fox all you want, but you'll never get the grapes that way.
Because if the fox had just admitted, wow, okay, I need to learn to jump higher, he would have actually learned something. By deciding the grapes were sour, he just closed that learning loop. He got temporary relief, but he gave up the chance to get better.
So that need for internal peace, even if it costs us the truth, that also extends to how we see ourselves in social situations, right?
Which brings us to something I think everyone has felt, the spotlight effect. Yes, the spotlight effect. It's this mechanism of self-centered perception. It's this phenomenon where we consistently, and I mean dramatically, overestimate how much other people are noticing us, our actions, our appearance, everything.
I know this feeling so well. It's the source of so much needless anxiety. You walk into a meeting 5 minutes late, and you are just convinced that every single person in that room stopped talking, looked at you, and is now judging your professionalism.
Or you stumble just a little bit walking into a coffee shop, and for the rest of the day, you're just mortified, certain that everyone saw it and is secretly laughing about it.
The little coffee stain on your shirt that you're sure is glowing like a neon sign for everyone to see.
That's it. We just assume we are the main character in everyone else's story, just like we're the main character in our own.
But the reality check, and this is so freeing when you really get it, is that people are just not that interested in you.
Not at all. Their focus is almost completely internal. They're worried about their own anxieties, their own coffee stains, their own mistakes.
So while I'm worried that the person next to me on the bus sees a smudge on my glasses and is judging me,
That person is probably worried that you're judging them because they were talking too loudly on the phone a minute ago. It's this self-perpetuating cycle of social anxiety where everyone feels watched, but no one is actually doing the watching.
So the practical takeaway here is just to use that knowledge. When you feel that intense scrutiny, that feeling of being judged for some tiny mistake, you just have to consciously remind yourself.
This is probably just the spotlight effect. It's an immediate way to lower the stakes and just relax. The audience you're so worried about probably doesn't even exist.
Okay, so we've gone from internal stories to how we perceive the outside world. Let's dig into how that external world, especially numbers, can totally warp our judgment, even when the numbers are, completely random. Let's talk about the anchoring effect.
This is one of the most powerful and I would say most commercially exploited biases there is. It really shows how vulnerable our brains are to starting points.
The basic idea is pretty simple. If I ask you to guess something you don't know, like the population of South Dakota, your brain immediately looks for an anchor, a starting point to adjust from.
Right. You know it's not 10 million, you know it's not 10,000. You find a plausible range and then you adjust.
The problem is that we use these anchors even when they're totally arbitrary, or worse, when they've been put there by someone else to manipulate us.
The Redwood experiment is the classic illustration of this. So imagine we take two groups of people and we ask them to guess the height of the tallest redwood tree.
To Group A, we first ask a leading question with a high anchor, something like, is the tallest redwood tree taller or shorter than 1,200 feet?
And then to Group B, we ask the same final question, but the anchor is way lower. Is it taller or shorter than 180 feet?
And the result is so predictable it's crazy. Group A's average guess will be significantly higher than Group B's. That initial number, that anchor, just drags their final estimate towards it, even though they know it's just a random question.
And here's the kicker. Kahneman and his research partner Amos Tversky, they found that even anchors that are obviously random are just as effective. You don't have to believe the anchor has any relevance at all for it to work on you.
Which brings us to that German judge's experiment. This is just a stunning piece of evidence for this.
It is. It's so humbling. So researchers took a group of experienced German judges. These are pros, average of 15 years on the bench.
And they have them read a standard description of a woman who was caught shoplifting. A pretty routine case.
But before they decide on the sentence, they ask the judges to do something completely unrelated. They have them roll a pair of dice.
And the dice are loaded. They can only land on a total of 3 or a total of 9.
Then, immediately after rolling, the judges are asked to give their recommended sentence for the shoplifter. And remember, that number from the dice has absolutely nothing to do with the case.
But the results were just jaw-dropping. The judges who rolled a 9 gave the woman an average sentence of 8 months.
And the judges who rolled a 3, they gave her an average of 5 months.
A 3-month difference in someone's prison sentence, dictated by a completely random number they saw a few seconds earlier.
It's undeniable proof. The subconscious mind just grabs the first number it sees and uses it as a reference point.
And the entire world of sales and negotiation is just a playground for this effect.
It's everywhere. Salary negotiations. The first person to name a number sets the anchor. If they start high, even if it's unrealistic, that number now defines the reasonable range for the rest of the negotiation.
Real estate, too. The asking price is always set just a bit above what they expect to get, purely to anchor the buyer's perception of the home's value up high.
Or when you're shopping online, you see the original price, $150 crossed out next to the sale price, $75. That $150 is the anchor. It's there to make the $75 feel like an amazing bargain, even if the item was never really worth more than $75 to begin with.
So if we can't turn this off, how do we defend ourselves against it?
It has to be a conscious effort. It requires preparation. Before you go into any negotiation for a car, a house, a salary, whatever, you have to do your own research and set your own anchor in your mind before you ever hear theirs.
So I have to go in thinking, okay, their asking price doesn't matter. My research shows this is worth X, and that is my number. That is my anchor.
That's exactly it. You're creating a shield by giving your brain a better, more well-researched starting point. Or, you flip it. You make it your goal to be the first one to speak and get them anchored to your number.
And that kind of relative thinking, it's not just about numbers, is it? It's about context in general, which leads us right into the contrast effect.
Yes, the contrast effect is basically our brain admitting that it's terrible at making absolute judgments. We have a really hard time deciding if something is good or expensive or beautiful in a vacuum. We need a reference point.
We judge things based on what they're sitting next to. The contrast is what defines our perception.
The car upgrade example is perfect for this. If you're buying a $20,000 car and the dealer offers leather seats for $3,000, that feels outrageous. It's a huge percentage of the total cost.
But if you're buying an $80,000 luxury car and they offer the same $3,000 leather seats,
it seems like nothing, a rounding error. It feels like a small, reasonable add-on compared to the enormous price of the car itself. The contrast changes everything.
And there's that study about saving money. The one where people's behavior makes no logical sense.
Right. Researchers found that people would happily walk for 10 minutes across a parking lot to save $10 on a $30 kitchen gadget.
Because $10 feels like a huge saving compared to $30. The contrast is big.
But almost none of those same people would walk 10 minutes to save $10 on a $1,000 suit.
Even though the money saved, $10, and the effort required, 10 minutes of walking, are exactly the same.
The value is identical, but the context, the contrast, makes the $10 saving on the suit feel insignificant. It's not worth the effort.
So the call to action here is just to catch yourself. When you're about to buy something, ask yourself, do I think this is a good value on its own or just because of what it's sitting next to?
Because our judgment is almost always positional, not absolute.
Okay, let's shift from context and numbers to how we judge people. Specifically, how our brains build these incredibly fast stories about them based on, almost no information. This is the halo effect.
The halo effect is the science behind the saying, first impressions last. It's just true. We give a massive amount of weight to the very first piece of information we get about someone.
The classic example is the Alan and Ben comparison. So Alan is described as intelligent, industrious, impulsive, critical, stubborn, and envious.
And Ben is described with the exact same words, just in reverse order. Envious, stubborn, critical, impulsive, industrious, and intelligent.
And when you ask people who they like more, it's always Alan, overwhelmingly.
Right, because your brain needs to create a story, fast. For Alan, the first word, intelligent, creates a positive frame, a halo. So every negative trait that comes after is seen through that positive light.
So his stubbornness becomes determination. His envy is just a sign of his competitive drive.
But for Ben, the first word is envious. That creates a negative halo. So when we finally get to the word intelligent at the end, we interpret it negatively. We think, oh, he's probably smart in a sneaky, manipulative way. The first impression dictates the entire narrative.
And this leads to some really dangerous blind spots, like the honeymoon phase in a relationship.
A perfect example, those initial positive feelings create such a powerful halo that you just ignore or explain away all the little red flags, the small annoying habits. The halo is literally blinding you.
We see it in hiring all the time, too. If you find out a candidate went to a prestigious university, or even if they're just physically attractive, the halo effect kicks in.
The research on this is really clear. Attractive people are automatically seen as more honest, more competent, and more intelligent with zero evidence. And that prestigious degree creates a halo that makes managers subconsciously grade their performance higher.
The Bernie Madoff case is maybe the most extreme example of this. His reputation as this legendary, trustworthy investor created this massive halo.
And that halo blinded very smart, very sophisticated people. They just assumed he had to be legitimate because his reputation was so good. It stopped them from asking the basic questions that would have exposed the whole thing as a giant Ponzi scheme.
It even happens in schools.
Mm-hmm.
A teacher gives a student a high grade on their first essay, and they're subconsciously biased to give a higher grade on the second essay too, regardless of its quality.
So how do you fight this, especially in a group setting, like a hiring committee where you need to be objective?
Well, Daniel Kahneman suggests a strategy he calls decorrelated judgments.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means you avoid the typical meeting format where the boss or the most confident person speaks first, because that person's opinion immediately creates a halo, an anchor, that influences everyone else in the room.
So you try to get everyone's independent opinion before the discussion starts.
Exactly. You have everyone write down their thoughts or assessments privately first. That forces everyone to rely on their own observations, not the narrative set by the first person to speak.
It's a way of breaking the spell of that first impression.
It is. You have to remember, your brain's first story is often the laziest one. You have to consciously dig deeper.
Okay, from the stories we tell about people, let's look at the stories we tell ourselves about pure chance. This one is called the gambler's fallacy.
This is such a powerful trap. It plays on our deep-seated need to believe in some kind of balancing force in the universe. We think random events should, even out.
The classic setup is a coin toss. Let's say I flip a fair coin, and it comes up heads 4 times in a row.
Right.
Now you have to bet $1,000 on the 5th flip. What do you choose?
My gut, everything in me, is screaming tails. It just feels like tails it's due.
And that's the fallacy. The odds are still 50-50. The coin doesn't have a memory. It doesn't know it just came up heads 4 times. Each flip is a completely independent event.
But we confuse the odds of the sequence happening. 4 heads in a row is pretty rare with the odds of the next event.
Precisely. And casinos make billions of dollars off of this illusion. They put up those boards at the roulette table showing the last 20 numbers, knowing that it encourages people to bet against streaks, thinking the pattern has to break.
It's not just in casinos either. It's that awkward feeling you get on a multiple-choice test when you realize you've answered C 5 times in a row. You just feel this pressure to pick something else for the next one, even if you think C is the right answer.
And it gets really serious when it affects high-stakes, real-world decisions. That University of Chicago review you mentioned found that professionals are just as vulnerable.
Yeah, they looked at asylum judges.
Yeah.
And they found that a judge was 19% less likely to grant asylum to someone if they had just granted asylum to the previous 2 applicants.
It's that subconscious need for balance. The judge feels like they've been too lenient, so they tighten up, even though each case is supposed to be judged independently on its own merits.
And they found the same thing with loan officers. An applicant was more likely to get a loan if the previous 2 had been rejected.
So the defense here is just pure cold logic. You have to constantly ask yourself, are these events truly independent? If the answer is yes, then the past has absolutely zero influence on what happens next.
Okay, so let's move into how our brains don't just misinterpret the world, but actively work to defend our existing view of it. This next one is the big one, the ultimate perspective narrower, confirmation bias.
Right. If cognitive dissonance is about fixing a conflict after it happens, confirmation bias is the brain's proactive shield to make sure that conflict never even gets in. We are wired to want to be correct.
It's this self-reinforcing loop. You start with a belief. Let's say my favorite sports team is the best.
Okay.
You then subconsciously go looking only for evidence that supports that belief. You read articles about their star players, you watch their highlight reels.
And when you find that evidence, it feels great. It reinforces your belief. But the really critical part of the bias is what you do with conflicting evidence.
The evidence that they're not the best.
Exactly. When you see an article about how your team's defense is terrible or a statistic that shows they're overrated, your brain just dismisses it. You either ignore it, decide the source is biased, or you just forget it almost immediately.
So our brains are not acting like scientists trying to find the truth. They're acting like lawyers, building a case for a conclusion we've already reached.
That's the perfect analogy. And the modern world, especially the internet, has put this bias on steroids.
The echo chamber effect.
The echo chamber effect. You form a belief, you go to Google, and the algorithm, which knows what you like, just feeds you more and more information that confirms what you already think. You end up in these online communities where everyone agrees with you, and your convictions just get stronger and stronger.
And this is why political discourse can feel so impossible now. You have two people in two different echo chambers, and they literally cannot understand each other because they're operating from two completely different sets of facts.
And this is where Kahneman's warning about repetition comes in. He said, a reliable way to make people believe in falsehoods is frequent repetition, because familiarity is not easily distinguished from truth.
So if you hear an idea enough times inside your echo chamber, it just starts to feel true, whether it is or not.
It just becomes familiar, and that familiarity is comfortable. It shuts down any need to do the hard work of thinking critically or considering an opposing view.
So what's the strategy to fight this? You can't eliminate it?
You can't. The only strategy is to consciously force yourself to think gray. That means if you have time to reflect, you have to deliberately seek out the other side. You have to read the article from the publication you disagree with. You have to try to understand the best arguments of your opponents.
You have to actively search for the inconvenient facts.
You do. You have to accept that the truth is probably somewhere in that messy, uncomfortable, gray area in the middle.
Speaking of things we notice, that brings us to a really fun one with a great name, the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon.
Also known as the frequency illusion. And this is something literally everyone has experienced.
It's the classic, right? You learn a new word, or you decide to buy a specific model of car that you think is really unique.
And then all of a sudden, you see it everywhere. You hear that word 3 times in the next 2 days. You see that car on every street corner. And you think, this is so weird. What are the odds?
When really, the word and the car were always there. Your brain just wasn't tuned to notice them before.
That's all it is. It's a 2-step process. First, something new enters your awareness. That's called selective attention. Then your confirmation bias kicks in, looking for more examples of it, which reinforces the feeling that it's suddenly become more frequent.
So it's a combination of the recency effect, the new thing is fresh in your mind, and then confirmation bias jumps in to find more examples of it.
And it really just shows you how much information your brain is filtering out every single second of the day. You only see what you're primed to look for. Once the car is on your radar, your brain's filter starts flagging it as important, and you perceive the true frequency that was there all along.
Okay, and for our last one in this section on memory, we have the one that keeps us up at night, the Zeigarnik Effect.
This is a memory trap. The basic idea is that we almost always remember incomplete or unfinished tasks far more vividly than we remember the tasks we've completed.
It's that gnawing feeling. The workday is over, but that one unanswered email or that unfinished report is just looping in your head, stressing you out.
Exactly. Those open loops stick around in your short-term memory and consume mental energy. The effect was named for a psychologist who noticed that waiters could remember all the details of an order while it was still open, but would completely forget it the second the bill was paid.
The task was complete, so the brain just dumped the information.
The initial research thought the only cure was to actually finish the task, which isn't very helpful if it's 3 in the morning.
Right.
But thankfully, further research found a much simpler solution.
And what's that?
You just have to make a plan. Simply writing down the task and writing down a clear, concrete plan for when and how you're going to complete it is enough to satisfy the brain and stop the effect.
So you don't have to get up and do it. You just have to get it out of your head and onto paper.
Get it onto paper with a plan. That action signals to your brain that the task is handled. The loop is, for all intents and purposes, closed. It gives your subconscious permission to let go, which gives you peace of mind.
That is an incredibly practical tip.